Funding for this program was made possible by this station and other public television stations.
Each of us has a time for life. There's a misconception that we have forever. In reality, we have such a brief moment in time. But remember that even that brief moment is yours. It's yours to celebrate. To misuse it, to lose it, is to devalue our greatest gift, the gift of life. It's our personal celebration with so much to be joyous over, like the right to love, the wonder of mingling with unique people, of smiles, of hugging each other, of good food, of flowers, of trees, of sunlight, of green grass and cool summer breezes, of high-flying balloons, oh, and so much more. This is our time, the time of our lives. Don't miss a minute of it. It passes so quickly. The time to live and celebrate is now.
Isn't this fantastic? It's really beautiful, and especially is it beautiful for me because I don't know if you know it or not, but I am a native Californian, and to be on our Capitol grounds is just something really phenomenal, especially to happen to Felice Leonardo Buscaglia, this punk kid from East Los Angeles, and it's really a joyous, incredibly beautiful thing, and I'm so happy that we can share it together. And people say to me all the time, why do you live in California? You know, well, this is the reason. I mean, look at the day and look at the faces, and it's really a beautiful thing. But also there are other reasons for living in California. I was reading lately a book by Lee Shipley called It's an Old California Custom. And Lee says that to be a Californian is to ride forth seeking romance. And I've been doing that for years. To gamble on anything. And I've been doing that for years. To be grandiosely hospitable. Isn't that wonderful? I love it. And I'm really available for parties. And to eat, drink, and be merry. Well, I've been doing that for years. You know me and oinking out. To speak in superlatives. All you have to do is listen carefully for the next hour, and you'll hear the superlatives. To believe what isn't true. Isn't that nice? I've always believed what isn't true. It's made all the difference in my life. To tackle the impossible. Well, that's what it's all about. And to seek shortcuts to heaven. Isn't that nice? I don't think it's going to work, but if the Californians try it. But anyway, to get down to business, and you know that I can never speak with a coat on. And I want you to know that I bought a new one for this occasion. Isn't it fantastic? It's really lovely. Now that you've appreciated it, I'll take it off, and also the tie, and then we'll be able to go. But anyway, I had a speech teacher at one time that said that you are always very impressive when you open a speech and you quote either Dante, or you quote Shakespeare, or you quote Benjamin Franklin. Everybody is very impressed, you know. And I know I'm going to shock him to death when I open my speech, because I'm going to quote from a fortune cookie. And that's the truth. I was in Honolulu and I broke open a fortune cookie and I read this. It says, "Life is what happens while we're spending time making plans for life." You know, all of a sudden it flashed on me. I had a beautiful, beautiful friend who always wanted to go to Italy. She wanted to see her roots. She wanted to see her relatives. She was always planning to go next summer. She died last year. She never saw Italy. I got a letter from a reader. It said this: "I've spent time, I've used time, I've killed time, I've abused time, I've saved time and I've copped time, and I've wasted time trying to stop time. Now they tell me I've no time left. Where is it gone, Leo, this time of my life?" I think it's time that we ask ourselves this question. I don't know whether some of you know, but, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but around Christmas time, I had a massive coronary. And if you're ever going to have a massive coronary, you should do it my way. It ended up being a quintuple bypass operation, and it happened in a hospital, and I passed out in the arms of a cardiologist. Now, that's the only way to have a massive coronary. But the thing that this did for me as I spent my time recuperating and coming back, and because I was dedicated to the process of wellness, I was not going to be ill long, and I gave up being ill very, very quickly. But in that process, I became acutely aware of time. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today about the time of life and the time to love, which is certainly now. You know, all of a sudden it occurred to me when I was lying in bed with all of these life support equipments coming out of me, you know, looking like something from another planet, and never having been ill a day in my life, and all of a sudden getting this whole treatment all at once, was how frail we are as human beings. One day you're making plans to go home and you may never get there. It seemed to me like we were like squishy, wonderful little caterpillars who maybe momentarily will become butterflies. And maybe some of us never will. But the realization of that caused me to think that the next time I get a captive audience like you, I'm going to talk about time, because I have never seen so many people wasting so much time. It's as if we have forever, but we don't. We have a limited amount of time. And there is a time for so many wondrous things. But I think so much of our time is spent on trivia. You know, I was recently doing a show in Chicago, and I was walking down the street, and I had the most wonderful experience because a man saw me from across the street, and taking his life in his hands, he came charging across, and he said, "Buscaglia, oh, I love you, I love you, I love to be loved." And he threw his arms around me, and he said, "Oh, please let me take you home with me." And he said, "You know, my wife loves you, and you've made us both so happy, and it would be the greatest day of her life if you just came home. Just for a few minutes." He said, "You know, I just live down the street, and we could take a taxi and be there in 5 minutes, and it would just make her so happy." Well, you know, I was on one of my rare occasions. In fact, to tell you the truth, I was buying this coat. And I decided, you know, if it's between a coat and this marvelous man and his beautiful wife, I'm going to go home with him. So we got on this taxi, and we drove home, and I said, "Now remember, you've got to tell your wife I have only 5 minutes because they're going to be picking me up at my hotel in just a very short time." He said, "5 minutes, that's all." So he brought me up in this elevator, and we stood in front of the door, and he pressed the bell, and he stepped aside, and his wife opened the door, and she said, "Oh, my God!" And she said, "It's you, it's you. Come on in, oh my goodness." You know, she got so excited. It was so beautiful to see this. You know, one of the greatest things in your lifetime is to walk into a room and have somebody smile and happy because you've come in. And so she brought me in there, and the first thing she said is, "I'm going to make you a lasagna." And I said, "Oh, please don't. I have only 5 minutes. Sit down, and we'll really relate beautifully for 5 minutes. It's not the quantity of time, it's the quality." And she said, "Oh, but I can't have you in my house and not give you something. Let me give you something to drink." And I said, "Well, how about a glass of water?" And she said, "Oh, God," she said, "I don't have mineral water." I said, "Mineral water? I drink water out of the tap." She said, "I can't have tap water." She said, "Honey, go buy mineral water." I said, "I only have 5 minutes." So then she said, "With or without ice?" I said, "Look, no ice, just out of the tap." "Oh, I can't give you that. I'll get you some ice." Time's ticking away. And she goes in, and then it's not good enough to serve it in a jelly glass. She gets her crystal out, and of course it hasn't been used for ages, so she's polishing her crystal. And then she brings out this crystal glass of water with ice cubes and puts it down in front of me, and the 5 minutes are up. You know, it was really sad. And I think of how many times we spend our entire lives doing for others, when the real valuable thing would be sitting down and just looking at somebody, touching somebody, spending a minute with no distractions, saying, "I'm yours for these 5 minutes." What a wonderful thing it would be. And you know, I sat down and I figured out that by the time we're 60, we will have spent 526,000 hours of life. And then I broke it down, and I thought 72,000 hours of those will be spent eating. Isn't that amazing? And if you eat like I do, it's going to be more than that. 154,000 hours sleeping. 22,000 hours in the bathroom. Think of how much you could save with 1 day of constipation. 98,000 hours at work. 100,000 hours if you're an average American watching television. And 105,000 hours cleaning and cooking and shopping and taking the kids to Little League and Scouts. Is that the way we want to spend our lives? You know, now a lot of those things are essential. You can't do without it. But I was thinking of maybe trimming here and there, and if we did trim here and there and make time, then how should we spend the new time that we've acquired by becoming aware of time? And because I really believe that the very people who resist the notion that time's going to kill them are those who usually spend all of their time killing time, waiting. And so I suggest that maybe we take more time to learn, because learning produces change, and change brings surprise, and surprise brings joy. And let's take more time for fun, because fun brings laughter, and laughter brings wellness, and wellness prolongs life. And let's take more time for silence brings centeredness, and centeredness brings understanding, and understanding brings peace. And boy, do we need it. And take more time for giving. For giving brings satisfaction, and satisfaction brings reason, and reason maintains sanity. And take more time for love, because love may not make the world go round, but it sure makes the trip a lot more exciting. And so let's start with take more time to learn. You know what I found out over the years? We hear it said that what you don't know doesn't hurt you. That's nonsense. What you don't know is usually the cause of your greatest unhappiness. Now, you know, it's true, all of us are ignorant about something at some time. But that means we have forever to continue to learn and to continue to change and continue to do these wonderful things that learning brings. You know, you keep hearing people say, if I had only known, if I knew then what I know now. Well, you know, you can't, but it's all there. And if you dedicate yourself to the process of learning, it's going to be a fantastic life. But the problem with learning that has turned us off for so many years is the fact that most of education is directed toward filling our minds rather than opening our minds. And therefore, we're bored to death with the process of learning. You know, I was amazed to learn that Einstein was literally kicked out of school when he was in high school because he was learning differently from the other children and it was disturbing them. And he wrote in his autobiography, out of school, I had finally had time to wonder about time and space. So 11 years after expulsion from high school, I published The Theory of Relativity, which eventually changed our way of understanding the universe. It was lucky they kicked him out. You know, I was recently in a high school, and I was sitting down with a bunch of young kids, and the life was still there. What we need is teachers who are excited about teaching life and weary of just feeding in garbage that is useless. But anyway, I was there and I was telling them about experiential learning and how important it is not to just read about something or hear about something, but dive in the middle of that something and experience it. I said, if you want to know a tree, you've got to get up in a tree, you've got to sit in a tree, you've got to smell a tree and taste a tree, or otherwise you're not really experiencing a tree. It's the same way with people. If I want to know you, I don't just say, how do you do? You know, I want to grab you in my arms. I want to feel you a little bit. I want to look in your eyeballs. I want to hear a little bit about your history. And then I'll understand you. Anyway, I told this to this kid, and he was all hepped up about this. He said, yeah, we really have to experience, you know. Then I went to lunch, and when I came back, all of his buddies were around. They said, Dr. Buscaglia, you know what happened? I said, no, John climbed a tree, and he was up there, heaven forbid, when the boys' vice principal came by. And the boys' vice principal yanked him out of that tree and kicked him out of school for 2 weeks. You know, I said, oh, now that's not possible. So I went to see the boys' vice principal. it was possible. Here was this big guy behind this desk, and he said, I said, I'm Dr. Buscaglia. He said, are you the guy that told these kids to climb trees? I said, well, not exactly, you know. But I mean, I'm really for climbing trees. I think that's a wonderful experience. And he said, that's because you go back to your halls of ivy, and then when they fall out of the trees, they're our responsibility. And I kept thinking about how many fall out of trees. You know, 1 out of 1,000 kids that climb it. So are we going to deny them all of those wonderful experiences? Are we going to cut down the mountains because people fall out of the mountains? Are we going to stop taking baths because somebody slipped in a bathtub? You know, but he kept saying, you're a menace. Well, I knew I wasn't going to get very far with that. And so I went to see the kid. And, you know, the kid was really kind of happy. 2 weeks out of school. And I said, you know, I'm really sorry. And he said, oh, no, Dr. Buscaglia, the fault's not yours. He said, listen to this, I made a bad judgment. There are times to crawl into trees, and there are times not to. You know, now this kid was right on. But what a shame that he had to be treated this way and experience this. But maybe now he's learned. And there's a lot of process as we grow older, and you know it and I, that is not a process of learning, but a process of unlearning. All the hypocrisy that's been taught to us. I remember once working with an adolescent kid who said to me, you know, my mom says to tell the truth, but every time I do, she smacks me. Think about that. And then there was some learning that we never forget. I mean, it goes on in our lives forever. One of that, Mama was a wonderful teacher. Not only was she strong, and not only did she know how to teach without any teaching credentials, but she changed a lot of our lives. And I remember one of the most incredible learning experiences I ever had with Mama was on a Christmas period, during Christmas time. And I don't know, but in Italian families at that time, we didn't talk about Santa Claus. We talked about the Christmas angel. Did you have Christmas angels? Well, you were just as well off. My Christmas angel must have been the weirdest person that ever was, you know, because all the other kids that believed in Santa Claus, they got bicycles and toys and dolls and basketballs. You know what I got? Bananas, oranges, maybe a little bit of chocolate, maybe a car or two. But we'd had a big pot-bellied stove in the kitchen, and all the family, all the bambini would put up their stockings, the biggest ones you could find, you know. And then you'd come down and you'd find the bananas sticking in it. And for some weird reason, always raw chestnuts. Now, I wondered, what the hell am I supposed to do with raw chestnuts? You know, and I'd ask all my friends, do you get raw chestnuts? You know, what's raw chestnuts? But anyway, I remember I was particularly bratty at this point in my life, a real monster. And Mama kept saying, be careful, the Christmas angel sees everything. Well, you know, I didn't believe it. I said, the Christmas angel has better things than to watch me be a brat. And so I went right on being a brat. And I remember on Christmas morning, it used to be one of those wonderful occasions where we all got down and we ran into the kitchen to look what was in our stocks, you know, and so on and so forth. And my brothers and sisters all ran in with me, and there they had the bananas and the chestnuts and everything. And in my sock, there was a stick, you know, and a little note from the Christmas angel. And it said, Christmas angels don't leave presents for brats. You know, I learned. I haven't been bratty since. But you know, another thing that learning does that's so exciting is what Herbert Otto says, and John Mann in a book called Ways of Growth. He says, personal growth, more often than not, takes place when a person has risked himself and dared to become involved in experimenting with your own life. Now, you know, you can't experiment with my life. That's my life. Let me be. But you can experiment with yours. Every day can be a new discovery, and every day you can be newly born. And that's what change brings through learning. I have a woman friend that many, many years ago, I was working with her, and she said to me, you know, I don't think my husband has ever had an original thought from the day I married him, or an exciting idea. She says, I can almost, at this point, we've been married for 15 years, know what he's going to say before he opens his mouth. Profound statements like, Hi, honey, what's for dinner? What do you want to go out for? It's nicer here. What time's the ball game? You know, that's doomed. That kind of a relationship has nowhere to go. Walk in one day and say, hey, honey, let's swing from a tree. Now, there's dialogue she doesn't know about. Eric Butterworth says, when the ties that bind the human mind and our learning has tied our human mind again and again, and a person is introduced finally to himself, the real self that has no limitation, the bells of heaven ring for joy. We are then thrust forward to a new rendezvous with life. And that's it. Every time you learn something, you're coming in contact with new life, new joy. You'll never be the same person and you'll never be boring. And then, let's take time for fun. You know, we are in the most serious society. Everything is heavy. You know, if you're laughing, you must be frivolous. You've got to be sitting there really morose and in pain, and then you are significant. You know, I learned in my family to laugh early. Mama laughed at everything. Papa used to come home despondent and say, we don't know where our food's going to come from, and she'd roll on the floor with laughter. You know, you learn from things like this. I remember when I was 17, I got a car, my first automobile. And of course, it was an old used Chevrolet and kind of little, but it was wonderful. And I was just learning to drive. And I was on Alameda Street in Los Angeles. And you know, that's the place where those gigantic 2-ton trucks are. And Mama was in the front with me, and Papa was in the back. And I was just learning, and at that time you had to signal, remember? You had to say you were making a left turn, and all the cars were coming, and the trucks were coming, and this huge truck was behind me. And he was honking and cussing out the window, you know. And I was getting more and more nervous, and I was sitting there waving, you know. And then all of a sudden I decided I'm just going to go. And I saw a little opening, and I shifted, but in my nervousness I shifted in reverse and backed into him. You know, Mama started laughing like it was going out of style. Papa broke up. I got the mood of it. We were all laughing when this huge guy got out of his truck and he came plowing over to us. You know, and he started to go in there to grab me out of the way, really let me know. But he looked at us. Here we all were doubled up with laughter. Didn't even scratch his car. Mine was smashed to smithereens. You know, and he just looked at us laughing and he said, good God. Went back in the truck and finally waited for me to make a left turn. But laughter is wonderful. You know, I don't know if you've heard, but Mother Teresa in Calcutta insists that all of these people who are working for her and helping the poor and the despondent and the ill be people who know how to laugh. They're laughing all the time. In a wonderful book by Mageridge called The Gift of God, which is about Mother Teresa, he says, Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity are induced to make their houses constantly ring with laughter as St. Francis and his friars laugh their way up and down the streets of the medieval world. In every saint there is a clown, and vice versa. What are saints, after all, but transcendental clowns, who, when the gates of heaven swing open, hear mixed with celestial music, celestial laughter. At the heart of the universe, they find a mystery that is a joke. You bet, and when you get in touch with that joke, you're going to be a clown and laugh your way into eternity. I have a friend who is so based on doom. Every time the telephone rings, she says, my God, it's Fred, her husband. He's been killed. You know? She feels the slightest bump or wound, and she's sure it's terminal cancer. Telegrams are always the announcement of doom. If her kids are 5 minutes late, she's sure they've been kidnapped. If someone says they've got to talk to her, she starts worrying 2 weeks in advance. What do they want to say to me? Do you know that kind of person? Is it not possible also that the telegram is going to say, I love you, guess who? The phone call is going to be someone inviting you to the greatest party you've ever been. There's a 50-50 chance that this is possible. I mean, don't go into doom gulch until it's absolutely necessary. But it really is funny And we don't seem to realize that it takes 3 times as many muscles to frown as it does to laugh. And every time we laugh, we found out now, we're secreting a hormone that is a natural painkiller. So the more you laugh, the more you can throw out your aspirin. Laugh your way into health. You know, Jonathan Friedman says, he did a wonderful study, and he said, what makes people the happiest? Listen to what he found. He divided up men and women, thinking that men and women, for some reason or other, would be different. Can you imagine? Anyway, women here, men here, and the top 3 were friends, love, and satisfaction in work. Those were the 3 things that made people most happy. And you know, they all have something wonderful in common, and that is they're all free. You can't buy them. They depend on you and your decision. But think about it, your happiest times have always been when you were truly communicating with someone in a loving fashion. And that costs nothing. It's the most wonderful thing. Paula and Dick McDonald, in a wonderful book called Guilt Free, tell us a little bit about how to get in touch with joy again in case we've lost it. And they say, do little nasty things that you couldn't do before, and it'll bring you back the feeling of joy. They suggest things like throw an unanswered survey in the waste paper basket. They suggest that you give the dog a leftover pork chop. You know, when you think about it, what the hell are you going to do with 1 pork chop? Make the dog happy. They say package all your hand-me-downs and all your useless gifts that people have given you over the years, and the fruitcake that Aunt Milfred gave you last Christmas, and put them in your car and let somebody steal them. Isn't that wonderful? But that's what it means. It means being a little bit crazy to get back in touch with fun. And hear more laughter ringing out in your home. Teach your kids that there is such a thing called joy in a world where everybody is telling you there's nothing but despair. Don't believe it. Laugh yourself into wellness. There's a beautiful book called, there was an article called On Having Fun, and they remind us again that it involves the notion that life is not really all that serious. It's an ability to suspend the idea of heavy responsibility for your own and everyone's survival. You're not responsible for everyone's survival. And to be able to abandon ourselves to curiosity and to playfulness and flowing fun feelings that whirl up from sources around us. It's saying, let's hold everything for a while and play. Wouldn't that be nice? Somehow or other, it seems to me we've forgotten how to play. And I don't mean match your own joy with somebody else's. Everybody you're sure is always happier than you. That is until you get to know them. And then you realize that they really aren't, and that you make your own joy. And don't match yourself after commercial joy that you see on TV, for heaven's sakes. Have you seen this new commercial? It looks like a bunch of crazy people. What they're doing is they're sitting around a table and breaking up the Wheaties or the shredded wheat. Have you seen that? You know, and here is the whole family, grandmas and children, breaking the shredded wheat frantically. You know, how come we don't feel that kind of joy out of breaking the shredded wheat? You see people swinging from trees, standing on their head over double mint gum, flying up in the air over Toyotas. You know, I'm convinced that if you were that ecstatic over everything, you'd be too damn tired to have fun. I'm always really interested in people that go on planned vacations. You know, they are really determined to have fun. It costs them $1,000. And so they're saying, get the kids! Honey, when you come, the bus is waiting. Boy, that's fun. You know, Abraham Lincoln said that most people are as happy as they make up their minds to be. And I fully believe that. If you decide that you're going to have joy, you don't have to measure it against anybody else. You have your kind of joy and share it with me because I need it. And then make time for silence. You know, we also live in a society that is so overwhelmingly noisy. Not only our own static, but external noises that keep us from hearing. Emerson says, "Let us be silent that we may hear the whispers of the gods." You know, I'm convinced that gods only speak in whispers, and so many of us live a mundane life because we're never silent enough to know this. I spent so many years in the Orient where silence is indeed holy, and there's a whole different atmosphere about silence. If you ever want to get someone to talking, just shut up for a minute. When they feel the awkwardness of the silence, they immediately begin to talk. Being in a car with someone and not having constant tack, 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 you know, really gets to people. They have to say, and you couldn't be having a good time if you are silently looking at each other. That's impossible. Something's got to be going on, you know. But we've got to be able to lift ourselves out of the mundane. And we can only do that in marvelous, incredible ways, like not being afraid of the magic and the mystery of silence. We can do it through music. We could do it through prayer. We could do it through silence of all kinds. We can do it through expression in the arts. We can do it through sports. Anything that takes our full concentration and we don't have to think about it anymore, we let it go. I had a Buddhist teacher once that used to say, when things become too much for you, empty your head. And the way to empty your head is to meditate on the tip of your nose. Get that in your mind very, very set. And once you've done that and you've closed your eyes and you see the tip of your nose, let it fall off. But you stay there in that empty space. Try it sometime. It's a gas. If I see you walking up down the street with your eyes closed, meditating on your nose, it'll be delightful. But you know, we only believe and appreciate what we think is tangible. And we forget that sometimes the most important things are the things that we can't taste and touch and chew, and we just simply have to have faith that they're there. Lao Tzu, in his beautiful book, The Way, says that it is the emptiness that is the essential thing. He says, the space between the spokes are what make a wheel useful. In a glass pitcher, it's the emptiness that we use. In a house, it's not the walls and the ceiling that matter, it's the empty space that's useful. And therefore, we are helped by what is not to appreciate what is. So let's find the emptiness in us. Let's get again in communication with that emptiness and find out the wonder of the silence. Find a time for you. I remember I said this once to a father I was counseling, and he said, when do I find a minute for silence? I get up in the morning, there's all the fuss in the house, I get in the car, I go back, all day long in the office, and I said, well, try to see if you can just give yourself 5 minutes. And so he found a wonderful solution. When he got home at night, he'd say hi to the kids and the wife and everybody, and then he'd go in the john and lock the door. And he said, there for a long while, you're allowed to be alone. Imagine having to lock yourself in your own home, in your own toilet, to be alone. But he said after a while it began to become suspicious, and then the kids would come up and knock on the door and say, what are you doing in there, Daddy? And he even lost that. Find a time and a place. You all need it. Aloneness can be one of the most beautiful things in the world, and it doesn't necessarily have to be lonely. But find silence again. It's important, or we're all going to go mad. And then take time to give. You know, most of us feel we have nothing to give. You know what you have to give that's the greatest thing? You! Maybe you've forgotten that. I have a friend that did the most beautiful thing to her husband for his birthday. Instead of getting him a gift, she put a bow around herself. And she said, happy birthday, here I am. Is there a greater gift? But it takes guts. In a book called Search for Significance, there's a beautiful statement. The search for significance is not a search for fame or notoriety or reputation or a place in history. Significance is a realization that you are a part of all that is going on, that life includes you, and that without you there will be a U-shaped hole in human existence. Isn't that nice? A U-shaped hole. Fill it up. You have a right to be there. Give yourself away. David Dunn wrote a beautiful book called Giving Yourself Away. He says, there is so much that every one of us, no matter how great or modest our talents, or how high or humble our stations of lives, can quietly do to break the routine of our daily lives and to cure some of the ills of our troubled environment. You and I can help. More than anything else, the world needs the healing influence of a great surge of simple thoughtfulness and kindness. That isn't asking a lot. Such a surge is beyond the power of world rulers and statesmen to give. It can only start with individuals. Right in our home communities, we average citizens can establish the spirit and set the pattern of a kindlier, more beautiful world. It's in your power to do that. Do it! We're given the possibilities, but what we do with those possibilities is a very different thing. I remember once I was working with supposedly a retarded, mildly retarded young lady. And she was wonderful, and we had worked with her on social skills, and we were trying to find something marketable so people would hire her. And we found out that a local cafeteria needed someone that could pour coffee without spilling it in the saucer, because it annoyed the heck out of the people who were buying it when there was coffee in the saucer. And so we worked with her for weeks, teaching her how to pour coffee in a cup without spilling it in the saucer, and she became an expert, and he hired her. But she also had another beautiful thing. She was in the cafeteria line. She was at the end with the coffee. And she would pour it in and she would say to them, "Have a nice day." She began to learn their names and said, "Hello, Miss Jones. It's so nice to see you." While all the so-called normal ones were sitting there tossing the stuff in your dish, you know, the potatoes on top of your eggs. Who cares about hello? But doing something is essential to keeping your sanity. There's a wonderful myth called the myth of Sisyphus. Many of you know it. And Zeus put Sisyphus on an island to drive him mad. There was nothing there to do, no company, no one. And as he was going there, he was finding out indeed that that was driving him crazy, until one day he realized that he could start doing something perhaps even as meaningless as rolling a stone up a hill. And he never got to the top of the hill, because by midday or early evening it would tumble down again. But the next day he would roll it up and it would tumble down, he would roll it up. And when they came after many, many years, they found Sisyphus as sane as he ever was. Do something. Find joy in what you're doing. Remember that if you do and you're spreading sunshine, as you're spreading it, you're under it too. And it comes right back to you. And then take time to love. And you know, this is my favorite thing. And make a conscious effort to love, because every one of us takes love so much for granted. It's as if we all know that we're loved. Well, we may know that we're loved, but we never tire of hearing it. Say it again. Say it every morning. Say it every evening. Don't leave your house without thinking to yourself the fact that I may never return again. How would I want to say goodbye? And that means good, wet kisses. Lots of tremendous hugs. But oftentimes we're kinder with our animals and inanimate things than we are with human beings and ourselves. There's a funny story about a woman who killed her husband with a bow and arrow so she wouldn't wake up her parakeet. I know people who purport to love all personkind, but hate everybody. Their solution to discrimination is to hate everyone. Then you're not discriminating. I have wonderful news for you. Love your enemies. It makes them so damn mad. You know, Herbert Otto wrote a beautiful book, or edited a beautiful book called Love Today. And this is what he says. Love is one of the most important elements in everybody's life. In contemporary Western culture, where estrangement from self and others has become a psychological epidemic, love has never been more important. That balloon knew it. Love starvation, recognized or unrecognized, is the basis for much interpersonal unhappiness and intrapsychic turmoil. As we cease to love ourselves and others, we die. And we join the living dead around us, the zombies who move through life uninvolved, unfeeling, uncaring, clothed in the remnants of superficiality and strangled by their fatal commitment to the status quo. The legion of the living dead suffers from the far advanced disease of which we all seem to suffer. We do not give ourselves and each other enough love to sustain the high level of vital functioning of which we are capable. The more you are loved, the more you love yourself, the greater your capability for doing and sharing. It always frightens me that we have so little self-respect. When you tell somebody that they're wonderful, they say, "Who, me?" Wouldn't it be nice if you could stand up straight and say, "You're so right. I'm not fully me, but I'm in the process of becoming," and that's what's essential. Learning again to love and respect you, knowing that out of that you can understand all of the dynamics of you, and therefore it makes me more capable of loving you. It's not an ego-centered thing. It's probably the least ego-centered thing I can be involved in. The process of wanting to be all that I am so that I can give you the perfect gift. And I want to become and become and become as far as love is concerned. Bertrand Russell said, "Those who have never known the deep intimacy of an intense companionship or happy mutual love have missed the best thing that life has to offer. And the resulting disappointment inclines these loveless people to envy and oppression and cruelty." I really believe that at the basis of all cruelty and unhappiness lies an unloved human person. Now that may seem like an oversimplification, but it's proved again and again and again. There was an old adage that I once heard that said, no matter what the question is, love is always the answer. And you know that the more that I grow and the more that I become and the more that I learn, the more that I'm sure that's the truth. But you know, at the beginning, we almost have to dedicate ourselves to the process of love. It would seem that it's a natural outgrowth of who we are. It isn't. Somehow or other, we've become estranged from love. We've got to start again in the process. If we're fearful, we've got to start risking again, reaching out again, trying to touch again, reawaken again. It's always there. Love never dies. At best, it's lying dormant. Dive in the middle of it, wake it up, and then put it into real action and watch what it does to you and to the people in your lives. But remember that all of these things are done in the now. Time belongs to us. It's our time. It's nobody else's time if we take full control of it. But it's always in the now. That's the essence. Too many of us have spent all of our lives decrying the fact that we didn't have the kind of youth or the kind of experiences that we could learn from in order to dedicate ourselves to love and to life. What a pity! There's nothing you can do about what happened to you. It's done, it's over. Take it in your arms, love it, caress it, say it's my history. It may not be the greatest history in the world, but it is my history, and it brought me to where I am now. And that's what's important, because I have to start from there. And others of us are dreaming so much in the future that we miss the now. We're always living for a tomorrow that never comes. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll see her tomorrow. I'll tell him I love him tomorrow. And then it's too late. There's no such thing as tomorrow. The only reality is now. Yesterday and tomorrow are illusions. There's a wonderful book called Man and Time by Priestley. I'm sure many of you have read it. And there's a beautiful statement in there by Maurice Nicole. He says, "Time man in us does not know the now. He's always preparing for something in the future or busy with what happened in the past. He's always wondering what to do and what to say and what to wear and what to eat at the next moment and tomorrow. He anticipates, and we, following him, come to the expected moment, and lo, he's already somewhere else, planning future lives. This is the process of becoming, where nothing ever is. Isn't that nice? This is the process of becoming, where nothing ever is. Now contains all life and the eon of life. It is only what is done in the now that counts. All insight, all revelation, all illumination, all love, all that is genuine, all that is real lies in the now. And in the attempt to create now, we approach inner precincts, the holiest part of life. For in time, all things are seeking completion, but in the now, all things are already complete. I love that. Life is now. Love is now. Growth is now. Learning is now. Joy is now. Ecclesiastes reminds us of something wonderful. It says, there is a time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to harvest. A time to destroy and a time to rebuild. A time to cry and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to find and a time to lose. A time for keeping and a time for throwing away. A time for quiet and a time for speaking up. You have a limited amount of time. And the time that you have is now. And the time to love is now. And as Martin Buber says, if not now, when? Thank you very much.
Funding for this program was made possible by this station and other public television stations.